Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. Good evening, councillors, and to those members of the public watching online. Despite the challenging circumstances, may I start by wishing you all a very happy new year. Before we begin, please could the monitoring officer confirm that the Great Mace is present in the council chamber, please?
Good evening, councillors, and happy new year. Yes, I can confirm it is in place, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Well, we've gone to item 1, which is apologies. I'll go to the whips. Councillor Hassel for the Conservative group, please.
Just Councillor Anderson, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor West for Labour, please.
At the moment, Councillor Jangir Khan, Mr. Mayor, but IT are trying to connect him.
Jolly good. Councillor Lynn, please. Lib Dems.
All present and correct, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Grace Senior, Reform Party, please.
All members present and correct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, everybody. Well, item 2, any declarations of interest, please? I take it none. Item 3, minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 25th of November 2020. Can I have somebody?
Move them as printed, Mr. Mayor.
Second that.
Seconder. Thank you. In front of me. Well done. Keep that going all night. Thank you very much. Right, we're on to item 4, announcements from the Mayor. I have a small number of announcements to make before we proceed. I'll go through the housekeeping. You'll have to bear with me on this. I know I say it every meeting. Once again, we are meeting remotely, and I'll ask you to continue to follow the process that we have established over the last 12 months for conducting these meetings. A phone number has been provided in advance should you encounter any technical problems, and written guidance is situated to the meeting request. I remind councillors that voting will be conducted by roll call and only when necessary. If there appears to be a broad consensus, I will take motions as agreed unless any individuals wish to register their objections. In addition, councillors may request that their individual vote is recorded in the minutes at any point, or 10 members may then call for a recorded vote under Council Procedure Rules CP 71 and CP 72, respectively. Finally, colleagues, we'll note that a late item has been circulated following the publication of the agenda last week, and I intend to take the minute extract from the Council Cabinet prior to consideration of the motions. I have further announcements. Firstly, councillors, you will know I take great interest in sport and our local teams. I would therefore like to extend on behalf of the Council our congratulations to Wayne Rooney on his recent permanent appointment as Derby County Manager. With the possible exception of Councillor Webb, I'm sure we're all hoping that he will be as successful as a manager at Derby as he was in his remarkable playing career. Tribute to key workers. Before we move on, I'd like to briefly reflect on the last 12 months and once again pay tribute to those who continue to demonstrate incredible courage and dedication in our battle against the coronavirus pandemic. I'd like to pay tribute to those in the National Health Service who are working tirelessly to protect human life under the most difficult circumstances. I'd also like to wish all key workers from across the Council and to partner organisations who continue to provide what services to our communities and support those in need. I'd like to recognise the contribution of councillors for their hard work in supporting residents during these unprecedented times. And finally, I'd like to thank all members of the public for their patience and perseverance as they deal with disruption to everyday life. Despite the challenges we have faced, there have been so many reasons to find inspiration, and I look forward to the time when we can properly celebrate these tremendous contributions together as a city. Does anybody else wish to make any comments? I'll go on to item 5, statements from members of the Council Cabinet. We now move to the main items of business. I understand there are no statements to be made by members of the Council Cabinet. Item 6, questions from members of the public. Next we'll hear questions from members of the public who received 7 in all, although some have been grouped together as they are on similar topics. I understand that members of the public have been provided with the appropriate opportunity to join on Skype calling in order to ask their supplementary questions. We'll hear a summary of each question from the officer and the relevant counsellor will respond. Each questionnaire will then ask their supplementary question. Before referring to Alex regarding that, we'll go on to question A, Alex, to Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question A is from Mr. Bal Mahal to Councillor Matthew Holmes, and his question is, what is the Council's policy in relation to the diversion of traffic from major roads to residential streets?
Thank you. Thank you. It's self-explanatory that major roads are most appropriate for high volumes of traffic. There is therefore no policy or technical strategy to divert traffic into residential streets and away from major roads. I'm aware of the area raised in question in the change on the A5111 was a safety improvement to the right turn into Eastwood Drive implemented in 2019. The right turn was available to drivers before 2019 changes, but it was poor by modern standards and presented an accident risk. A vehicle waiting to make that turn had very little space to enter the central reservation and avoid the potential of being struck by vehicles approaching from behind. I do appreciate that there's some local feeling that in making the right turn safer, it has introduced traffic into Eastwood Drive. It is possible that people are more confident in using the right turn, including residents who have benefited from the improved access. I'm aware that council officers have been monitoring the location and have been working with residents and local councillors. This has included a further consultation exercise which unfortunately has not resulted in a conclusive locally agreed solution. The technical opinion from our officers is that the road layout cannot be returned to the layout prior to the improvement. Clearly this would introduce the risks that the scheme was designed to mitigate, in officer opinion. The options are very limited, but include changes to Eastwood Avenue with consideration to additional restrictions or ultimately closing the central reservation with the resulting reduction in access for residents. Any of the options for further measures will require formal consultation to comply with the legal process. Council officers are still working with local councillors on selection of future neighbourhood priorities to test options. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. The questionnaire, Ben Menhol, have you got a supplementary question to Councillor Holmes, please?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Based on the North Eastwood Road Safety Campaign's report to Derby City Council, does the Council accept responsibility for creating the through traffic problem of over 11,000 vehicles per week on residential streets in Little Over?
Did you get the question, Councillor Holmes?
I did. As you may know, thank you for your question. I'm very willing to have further discussions about this and to receive correspondence, which I have already received. I will certainly discuss this further in my role as Strategic Transport Lead Member, and obviously try and liaise with officers and the councillors involved in terms of the neighbourhood work that they're doing. So what I'd say in response to that is that further discussion is required, and I'm happy to have that. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that. Councillor Holmes, you're going to be busy tonight. The next question, Alex, to Councillor Holmes again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe the next question is from Alison Martin. I think she is on the call to ask a supplementary question. It's to Councillor Holmes, and it is the Council still intending to demolish the assembly rooms, and what are the intended short-term and long-term uses for the site?
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. The application to demolish the assembly rooms is currently paused. The Council is working towards it being considered at the Planning Committee for a decision as soon as possible. Thank you.
Alison Martin, have you got a supplementary question? Please.
I do, actually. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Carry on then. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes, thank you for your extremely succinct response there. In 2018, the Derby City Conservatives pledged to refurbish the assembly rooms at a cost of just £10 million. Can you tell me what is now the total projected cost of funding the Becketwell performance venue, demolishing the assembly rooms, and providing a meanwhile use on that particular site?
Councillor Holmes?
I'd refer you to my previous answer.
Right, we're going to the next question.
Mr. Mayor, that was not an answer to the question. I asked if there was a cost. I asked for a cost.
Right, okay. Councillor Holmes, could you perhaps deal with that outside this meeting, please?
No problem.
Thank you. We're going to see from, and I think we've got three here. We've got two questionnaires here with three supplementary questions. Alex, would you like, again to Councillor Holmes, would you like to take over, Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that is correct. There are three questions here that have been grouped into a single written response, but Andrew Fellows will obviously be entitled to a single supplementary question and Mayor Bain will be entitled to two. The questions are as follows. In relation to the A38 junction scheme, how will the council reduce air pollution during the 4 years of construction? How will the council meet its Paris Agreement carbon budget whilst enabling road vehicle use? And what will the resulting climate impact be from any planned housing developments intended for after the scheme's completion?
Thank you. The questions raised all relate to the A38 junction scheme, which is led by Highways England. The development consent order has now been approved by the Secretary of State after a lengthy and detailed examination by the National Planning Inspectorate. Environmental issues were covered throughout the examination process, including air quality. The air quality modelling produced by Highways England for the A38 scheme suggested compliance with the EU limit value, and now UK regulations, along Stafford Street with or without the A38 diversions in place. Highways England will of course be monitoring the situation during the construction. The completed A38 scheme is predicted to improve air quality within the vast majority of sensitive receptor locations across the city. It is also worth stating that the Derby's Air Quality Action Plan was approved by Cabinet in November, and this sets out a wide range of air quality improvement measures designed to keep Derby within the national air quality objectives and regulations. The A38 junction scheme is designed to improve traffic flow east to west as part of the national major road network. Derby will benefit from the scheme because it will reduce the historic congestion we experience at each of these junctions because of the mix of local and through traffic. Highways England assessments predict that there will be no net change in vehicle emissions, even in their worst case modelling. This did not take into account the ongoing switching of vehicles to low or no carbon alternatives, which contribute positively. Highways England will again, of course, be monitoring the situation during the construction. I'm not aware of any future housing developments which are linked specifically to the completion of the A38 scheme, and it would be impossible to speculate on the construction approaches or energy sources in place by 2025, which would impact on carbon emissions. As you will be aware, UK government is committed to net carbon zero by 2050, and the full details of the A38 scheme can be found at the following web address. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Andrew Fellows, have you got a supplementary question to Councillor Holmes, please?
Yes, I have. Thank you very much. Councillor Holmes, as Highway England have stated that the council is responsible for any air quality, which measures will the council be implementing to reduce air quality as motorists divert off the A38 and through the city?
Thank you. I'm more than willing to clarify further if you have any further questions you'd like to send me, but I'd refer you back to our commitment as a council on clean air. We have a strategy, and you know that we're putting forward various measures to ensure that the city has clean air.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mayor Bain, you've got two supplementary questions to Councillor Holmes. Would you like to put your first one, please?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
That's fine, yes.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for your time and for your response, especially during these challenging times. I'm afraid there may have been a misunderstanding. Air pollution and carbon emission targets are separate issues. I'm aware the A38 junction scheme is a Highways England project, but I was asking for how the council now plans to act on the climate emergency by making their fair contribution to the Paris Climate Change Agreement after taking into account the 100,000 tonnes of CO2 from the A38 construction and the estimated 29,000 tonnes of CO2 estimated from induced traffic in Derby as a result of the A38. So that's 160,000 tonnes of carbon, and the carbon budget for Derby, calculated by the Tyndall Centre, shows that for Derby to make its fair contribution towards the Paris Climate Change Agreement, it has to stay within a maximum cumulative carbon dioxide emissions budget of 7.1 million tonnes of CO2. So the A38 scheme is taking an estimated 6% of the total transport CO2 budget for Derby and will make reducing transport emissions in the future more challenging for Derby compared to a do minimum scenario for the A38. So I'm asking if anyone could offer calculations and an action plan for how Derby will make its fair contribution to the Paris Climate Change Agreement after taking into account the CO2 from the A38 expansion. So where will the carbon savings come from? And I'm happy to help by sharing reports on decarbonisation.
I don't wish to be rude, but I want to get on with the question. We've got quite a lot on tonight, so I'll invite Councillor Holmes to reply to your question.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much for your supplementary question, and you know, I'd certainly be happy to receive further dialogue from yourselves to clarify some of those points. What I'll say in an overarching way is that the council is committed to dealing with climate change and the emergency, and also decarbonisation as part of the city's recovery plan. Just a couple of actions just to refer to again, our commitment to clean air, our strategy and the actions that we are taking in that area. But also there's a £3 million capital commitment ring-fenced currently for climate change actions as well. So I'm absolutely confident that we are committed to tackling these issues and playing our part in partnership, leading the way in the city. But that hopefully gives you some kind of confidence. But if there's very specific questions that you have, I'm very happy to receive those following the meeting. Thank you.
Mayor, you can ask your second supplementary question, but can you be brief, please?
Yeah, sure. The 11,000 homes was mentioned by the Secretary of State in the decision letter. So if the council isn't aware of that, I just thought that they might know that 11,000 homes were planned. But
I think on that, just to say, I think there needs to be clarity on that, because the inference was that we specifically in Littleover and Mickleover and Mackworth, we have a local planner housing plan, and many of those designated housing sites are well underway now, and we're very clear about where those developments are, whether we agree or otherwise. And I've had a lot to say about that in my time in local politics. I think there does need to be clarity on what that means within the city boundary or very close to it. That it's just not the case. Whether the A38 as a wider scheme in the wider region facilitates development, that's another issue. So I think it does need clarity. And again, if you want to seek that clarity specifically from Derby City, I'm more than willing to have dialogue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Thank you for your questions, Mayor. We're going to Dave Glasby's question again to Councillor Holmes. Mr. Clasby.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. I believe Mr. Clasby is on the call, although he has been experiencing some technical problems. Can I just check that he is able to participate in the meeting at this point?
Right, Mr. Clasby.
I've just unmuted his microphone. Mr. Clasby, are you able to hear us?
May I answer the question, Mr. Mayor, while waiting?
Can you hear me now?
Is that Mr. Clasby?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Clasby.
Wonderful.
Mr. Holmes will, Alex, will you put the question?
Yeah,
please?
of course.
And then we'll move to the supplementary.
Councillor Holmes's question. The question to Councillor Holmes is: what will be the impact on the retail sector and jobs in Derby as a result of potential congestion caused by the A38 junction improvements?
Thank you, Councillor Holmes.
It's an inevitable consequence of this scale of the construction, and at key junctions there will be periods when the local road network function will be interrupted. Concerns were raised during the examination process, and the council asked for additional analysis to be carried out by Highways England to demonstrate the impact on the inner ring road and on key junctions on the city road network. Highways England are still finalising this work, though it is likely to show increases in travel delays across most of the city's major road network. It is important to understand that this is it's very difficult to model. The impact of temporary works, for instance, creates unusual and fluid movements, so predictions on particular roads that might put forward definite delay or extended journey times is at best indicative. The Council will therefore continue to work with Highways England on traffic management, planning and mitigation, travel behaviour change and adaptation of work patterns. It is not possible to correlate the construction impact with retail jobs, particularly when there are other significant factors, mostly or predominantly COVID-19, which are impacting on employment and changes to sectors of the economy. The city will remain open and attractive to visitors, and whilst there will be impacts during construction, it is a nationally significant infrastructure investment scheme and offers a solution to historic congestion points in the city. The scheme provides very significant long-term economic benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Mr. Clasby, have you got a supplementary question, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Holmes. I suppose that it's interesting that what the answer shows is that actually going to be significant congestion in and around the city, and yet we're also being told that there isn't going to be a worsening of air quality, which I'm struggling to match those two up. What I'd really like to know is, given that the increased congestion will lead to poor air quality and increased noise for residents and delays for people getting to work, and potentially put people off going shopping in the city centre or struggle to get to their place of work, I'm wondering, what is the council's strategy to mitigate the worst of the congestion that's going to affect the whole of the city? And I speak as a resident of, in the northern part of the city, I live on Cowley Street, which connects Ashbourne Road to Kettleston Road, and my community is expecting the congestion to be horrendous and the air quality to be significantly worsened for the 4 years that this scheme is in place. I'm just wondering, what is the strategy to mitigate those worst impacts on the city of that congestion?
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. Work's been going on for some time to mitigate as best we can. There is going to be disruption. You know, it would be remiss of us not to say that, and you recognise that too. It's our job as a council to work with everybody concerned, including residents, businesses, commuters, to ensure that we mitigate as best we can. The work is ongoing. Again, the offer is there for you to contact me if you want to know if you have specific concerns. I can get officers to respond to that. But I will just reiterate that the long-term benefits of this scheme are immense. And it's something that the council has supported strategically for a long period of time, and we mustn't forget that in the longer term, this is going to be a scheme which will bring so much for this city.
Thank you, Mr. Clasby. Next question is from Simon Beavis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Beavis's question is, how can the council justify the loss of valuable green space, wildlife sites and ecosystems as a result of the A38 junction improvements?
Councillor Holmes again, please.
Thank you. The A38 Derby Junction scheme is classed as a nationally significant infrastructure project and led by Highways England. A public inquiry was held last year where Highways England, as the applicant, presented their scheme to 2 appointed inspectors from the National Infrastructure Planning Inspectorate, and began in October 2019 and ended in July 2020. Over this time, a very wide range of organisations and individuals attended a series of hearings and or made representations to the inspectors. The inspectors also considered a vast range of documentation, including all relevant national and local planning policies and the wider implications that are raised in this question. The Secretary of State has considered the findings of the public inquiry and last week granted consent for the proposed works, and the details, including 800 documents, can be found at the following web address. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Beavers. Final question, not for Mr. Holmes, pleased to note, from Emily Lonsdale, please.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, did Mr. Beavis want to ask a supplementary question?
Oh, I apologise. Yes, I apologise. I thought he'd done that. I apologise, Mr. Beavis. Can you put your supplementary question, please?
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned that the questioner missed off the first part of my question, which was that the Kingsway Island section of the A38 junction scheme slices through the eastern area of the Mickleover-Mackworth Green Wedge, and according to section CP18 of the local plans, is not one of the permitted development criteria for such an area. And my supplementary question.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I would say I'd refer you to my previous answer, but again, if you require a very specific response, I will certainly get officers to supply that to you if you're not satisfied with the answers so far.
Councillor Beavers, would you like to put your supplementary question if Mr. Holmes hasn't covered it?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, is this? I thought that was a supplementary question.
No, he's just making a point that you hadn't answered part of his original question.
Oh, I assume that was a supplemental, Mr. Mayor.
No, I take again, Mr. Beavers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As well as the A38 scheme, a substantial area of housing development has already been allowed to take place on the Mickleover-Mackworth Green Wedge. Can the council assure me that what is left of this green wedge and the other green wedges within the city will be protected from future development in line with the stated core principle in the local plan?
Thank you. I referred to this in a previous answer. My involvement in local politics is as a result of concerns over loss of green space and boundary developments, urban extensions. You have my absolute assurance, whilst I have any influence at a local level or within the council, that I will always look to make sure that developments are sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beavers, and my apologies again for not allowing you the supplementary question straight away. We're going to the last question then, which is not to Mr. Holmes, Councillor Holmes, from Emily Lonsdale, please. Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Emily Lonsdale's question to Councillor Williams is: what is the council's position with regards to school fines issued during the pandemic but outside of periods of national lockdown?
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Emily, for the question. In line with the disapplication notice issued by the Secretary of State for Education, no legal work is currently being undertaken, and issuing of penalty notices for the period has also ceased. The disapplication notice runs from the 5th of January 2021 to the 6th of February 2021, at which point it will be reviewed and an updated disapplication notice will be issued if required by the Department for Education that will cover the ensuing 4 weeks. At this time, work continues to encourage regular attendance for those children in the vulnerable category as defined by the DfE.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Emily Lonsdale, have you got a supplementary question, please?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My supplementary question is, did the Cabinet member not feel it appropriate to show leadership instead of playing party to a super spreading event during COVID-19?
Councillor Williams.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Therefore, I'm not going to answer that question.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. We're going to item 7 on the agenda. Questions relating to Derbyshire Fire Authority or Derby Homes. I have no questions that have been received. Item 8, question from non-council cabinet members. We now have further questions from non-cabinet members. There are 19 in total. And as permitted under Council Procedure Rule CP 18, we have questions to both cabinet members and committee chairs to consider this evening. However, before I take the questions, I'd like to invite Councillor Shankar to put forward a motion. Please, Councillor Shankar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's quite simple. We'd like to propose that we suspend the member question rule in relation to answers being read out by the relevant cabinet member and or councillor. But also, I'd like to propose, as it's the third consecutive time such proposal has been made, that we ask the monitoring officer to propose a permanent rule change at the next meeting of this full council, please, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Have you got a seconder, Councillor Shankar?
Yes, I'll second that, Councillor Repton.
Thank you. Okay. Now, now we have to take a vote on this unless anybody puts forward that we no need to.
Councillor Harwood, can I suggest that we take the two motions proposed by Councillor Shanker separately, please? So can we deal with the motion in relation to the questions being read out this evening first, please?
Yes, we can do that, and then we'll have again another situation regarding taking it to the next meeting as per CP. So CP 42, can we have your proposal and second? Anybody against it, or anybody want to vote? Anybody wants to say anything?
Can we have a vote, please, Mr. Mayor? If you require a seconder from my group, I think that will be forthcoming.
Right, okay. We'll have a seconder from your group then.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Pearce.
Right, we'll move to a vote then, Alex. All those for you to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, this vote is to suspend the council procedure rule that requires responses to be read out for this meeting only. So a vote is required. So could you, councillors, please indicate if they are for or against that proposal when I read their name, please. Firstly, Councillor Ashburner, please.
He's having technical issues, Alex.
He's got technical issues.
Okay,
yeah.
I think a colleague is trying to contact Councillor Ashburner currently, so we'll move to Councillor Barker, please.
I'm against.
Sorry, I should have gone to Councillor Atwell first. Councillor Atwell, please.
For.
Councillor Bettany.
For.
Councillor Kerr, please.
For.
Councillor Carr.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
Against.
Councillor Dinser, please.
For.
Councillor Eldrit, please.
For.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Froggatt, please.
For.
Councillor Graves Jr., please.
For.
Councillor Graves Senior, please.
For.
Councillor Hassel, please.
Against.
Councillor Heselgrave.
For.
Councillor Alison Holmes.
Against.
Councillor Matthew Holmes.
Against.
Councillor Hudson.
Against.
Councillor Hussain.
For.
Councillor Ingle.
For.
Councillor Jangir Khan.
For.
Councillor Shiraz Khan.
For.
Councillor Kuss.
For.
Councillor Lind.
For.
Councillor Marshall, please.
For.
Councillor McChrystal.
Against.
Councillor Nater.
For.
Councillor Nawaz.
For.
Councillor Patterson, please.
Against.
Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Peatfield.
For.
Councillor Adrian Pegg.
Against.
Councillor Paul Pegg.
For.
Councillor Potter.
Against.
Councillor Poulter.
Against.
Councillor Repton. Councillor Repton, please.
For.
Councillor Ralston, please.
In the interest of openness and allowing those that are watching to see it, I am against that.
Councillor Russell, please. Councillor Russell, please. Councillor Sandhu.
For.
Councillor Shanker.
For.
Councillor Skelton.
For.
Councillor Smale.
Against.
Councillor Stanton.
For.
Councillor Testro.
Against.
Councillor Webb.
Against.
Councillor West.
For.
Councillor Williams.
Against.
Councillor Willoughby.
For.
Councillor Wood, please.
Against.
And the Mayor, Councillor Harwood.
Abstain.
Bear with us 1 moment, please, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, the motion is carried by 28 votes to 19 with 1 abstention.
Thank you, Alex. So we'll go on to the second part of this then, which is a motion now putting forward that we write this into the Constitution. And again, we want a proposer and seconder, and then we'll put it to a vote. Proposer,
Mr. Mayor, just to point out, we just need a proposer and a seconder this evening. The motion is then adjourned pending the next meeting of full council in February, when a short report will be brought by myself on the implications of the proposal.
Thank you. Proposer, please.
I'll propose that, Mr. Mayor.
Seconder, please.
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Engel.
Thank you. Right, we'll move that back forward as per what Emily said. Okay, we're going to the item in question then now, which is questions to Cabinet members and also one to a chair, standards. And we'll start off with Councillor Carr's question to Councillor Wood. Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Carr's question to Councillor Wood is, are library users being asked to collect their library cards in person during the pandemic? And the written response is being displayed on the screen now.
Councillor Carr, have you had a chance to read it?
Sorry, I was muted, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have.
Would you like to ask a supplementary question then, Councillor Carr, to the Councillor Wood?
Not really a supplementary. I'd just like to know when it's going to happen. You know, how long it's going to take to sort a system out, because I don't think it's right for people to be going into the council house to collect an a library card. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mike. I have a lot of sympathy for what you're saying, and I can't put a time on it, obviously, other than to say as soon as possible. And I will ask colleagues to speed up this review.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Worston, a question to you from Councillor West, please. Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor West's question to Councillor Ralston is, what changes have been made to the council's procurement process under the current administration?
Councillor West, are you in a position to ask any other question? Councillor Ralston?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your response, Councillor Ralston. I just wonder what progress has been made on the reinstatement of the Derby Procurement and Commissioning Board.
Councillor Ralston?
Thank you, Councillor West. I'll be completely honest. At this point in time, that's something that we need to move forward with and reinvigorate, if that is the wish. And we're very much interested in speaking with you and progressing that in the future.
Right, Councillor Shanker's question to Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before we continue, could I just a colleague has just joined the meeting via an unrecognised telephone number. So can I just confirm who it is who has joined the call via telephone, please?
Can that person please indicate who they are, please?
I suspect it's Councillor Russell.
Alex, it's me. I'm having some technical difficulties, I'm afraid.
That's not a problem. We've got you noted down now, Councillor Russell. That's absolutely fine. So to carry on, Councillor Shanker's question to Councillor Ralston is, how much has been spent on consultants in the financial years 2018-19 and 2019-20?
And Councillor Shanker, have you got another supplementary to Councillor Ralston? Haven't you seen those figures?
I have, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much, and I hope Councillor Ralston will be honest in her answer again. And the Conservative manifesto stated you would impose a spending cap on the use of business consultants, cutting the council's spending by 50%. Have you achieved this?
Councillor Ralston.
Councillor Shanker, thank you for the question. I will refer you to the answer that's been given, but also in terms of detailing a bit more of a breakdown. Obviously, in terms of the revenue costs of consultancy fees, they have actually significantly dropped from year 15-16, which was over £1.5 million. it's now down to 300,000. It isn't quite in terms of the total because of the capital expenditure, and as you can appreciate, we have some significant capital projects happening. The top three, for example, that take up a full nearly £2.5 million, and within the capital expenditure of consultancies include the swimming pool, the market hall, and indeed the A52 project that, as you can imagine, having had to deal with the situation as it was that when we came into this council, we always accept that specialisms are required specifically on capital projects, and hence why that capital project costing is currently as high as it is.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Councillor Paul Pegg's question to Councillor Smale, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Pegg's question to Councillor Smale is, with the Sinfin waste plant closed and a reduction in the use of Rainsway Household Waste Recycling Centre, where is Derby's waste currently going?
Councillor Smale.
I think it's Councillor Pegg first.
Right, have you got a question to Councillor Smale? Another one to Councillor Pegg?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed. In 2018, the Conservative manifesto stated we will encourage recycling and reduce fly tipping by working to deliver a second major recycling waste centre that offers an alternative to the Rainsway facility. How is the second major recycling and waste centre coming along, please?
Thank you very much, Councillor Pegg. I refer you to the conversations that were had at the Council Cabinet meeting in December, which we discussed Rainsway. However, we have got a Communities Executive Scrutiny Board coming up on the 25th. If at your gift as chair, I'd be more than happy to come along to that, along with waste colleagues, to discuss the future of our waste service strategy. And I can discuss furthermore what we'd like to do with regards to a second site. Thank you.
I'm more than happy to accept that offer. I'm
Thank you, Councillor Pegg.
We can arrange that. Thank you.
Thank you. My question to Councillor Williams from Councillor Ezelgrave, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hazelgrave's question to Councillor Williams is, what is the average Ofsted grading for all state schools in Derby, and what is the average grading for those schools maintained by the council?
Councillor Ezelgrave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. You give me some figures. Now I'll offer you some. Under your watch, 6 of the 12 secondary schools with current Ofsted judgments have been found inadequate or require improvement. The most recent being in July 2019. Isn't it therefore clear to all that you are woefully failing in your 2018 manifesto commitment to help all schools achieve good or outstanding Ofsted judgments, certainly in the case of our secondary schools?
Councillor Williams.
No, I do not agree with that assessment. As you've seen there, the average grade for all state schools is 90% in Derby, and for LA maintained schools, it's 90%. So no, I do not agree with that judgment. But at the same time, there is room for improvement, and we work very, very closely with all of our schools, whether they're LA maintained, academies, trusts, free schools, PRUs. We work with all of them, and we will maintain that close relationship to try and make sure that all of our schools in all of the city, with whatever governance arrangements they have, are either good or outstanding, because that is what we are aiming for, and I will continue to do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Ralston, a question to you from Councillor Sain, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That question is, how many taxi drivers in Derby are entitled to financial grant support during the pandemic, and how many have applied, and how many have been awarded this support?
Councillor Sain, have you got a supplementary question to Councillor Ralston, please?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Ralston, thank you for answering that question. Can you make sure, because you can see from the successful application rate, it's very, very low, it's just about 10%. And part of the difficulty was that with making online applications, if the taxi drivers were asked an irrelevant question and that information was not appropriate for them to have in their possession, then the application form would stop them from proceeding any further. And that was the main difficulty, that in the previous application forms, some of the questions around your business rates and those kinds of things, they're not really that applicable to taxi drivers, and that's what stopped people making the application in the first place, and they gave up on it. So could you look at all the questions and test them out for the relevancy to taxi trade before they go out?
Councillor Ralston.
Thank you for that supplementary, Fareed. Indeed, I think if within the answer that's been supplied, it has been simplified, and some of that consideration of that input from taxi drivers has been amended. And if there is more work to do, please get in contact. We'll speak with officers, and we can ensure that that we make this as easy as we can. In relation to the 10%, we have to remember that although there is only 10% applied at the moment, in terms of the numbers that are there, the 1,000 driving licence 972, we do have to remember that some of those licences may have multi-vehicles, so they might have hackney carriages as well as private hire, so that will reduce the number that may be eligible for this grant, and also the fact that this grant is predominantly to support those. It's not for wages, it's for the costs and the overheads that are impacted. For example, those that may have a lease vehicle or something along those lines, because there is still the self-employed scheme that is available through the government to support our taxi licences as well. But we obviously worked hard on this straight away to get something out and available, because we do appreciate the hard work and the need for our taxi support services, for our taxis supporting us during this pandemic.
Thank you, Councillor Ralston. Another question to Councillor Ralston. Councillor Repton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Repton's question to Councillor Ralston is: why is the administration not asking the government to cover the cost of the proposed council tax rise?
Councillor Repton, have you got a supplementary question?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Councillor Ralston, for your initial answer. I'm a bit curious, because in 2018-19, in your manifesto, you committed to keeping council tax increases to a minimum, whilst in reality you've increased it by the maximum that you could, 11.997%, almost 12%. Should you not now apologise for misleading and letting down many thousands of families in this city, and ensure that this year there's no increase in this year's council tax by getting your government to intervene and freeze it? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ralston.
I would answer that with the fact that you're referring to something from the year 18 to 19. We're now in a 20 to 21, and there's an awful lot of things that have happened in that interim time, Mr. Repton, including a pandemic, a significant challenges to this council of projects I've already named today, including the A52 and various others. So I make no apology in the fact that as an administration, when we came in, our aims and aspirations were always to try and keep council tax as low as they could be. The reality of the situation is that in order to ensure we have a balanced budget, council tax is an element of ability for us to raise funds. And actually, in terms of government support, there continues to be a significant amount of support for our council tax residents in the form of the council tax support grants, and there are a large number of people across the city receiving those, 7,436 to be precise, to ensure that they only have to pay 70% of their council tax. So I think in terms of I'm trying to say here is I make no apology. We're doing all we can, and the people of the city recognise that council tax is an element of form of allowing us to pay for the statutory requirements of a local council and a local administration.
Right, thank you. Councillor Holmes, question for you from Councillor Peatfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Peatfield's question is: will the administration commit to replacing every tree removed by the planned A38 works?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I indicated I was going to provide a verbal response,
yes,
which I will do.
So
The A38 junction scheme is led by Highways England. As Councillor Peatfield is well aware, replacement planting will occur, led by the HE as part of the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peatfield, have you got a supplementary?
I do, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the last behavioural change meeting that was conducted regarding the A38 with Highways England, I challenged them on the amount of trees that were going to be removed,
because according to the plans, there are indicated areas of trees to be cleared, but there is no actual finite number of trees. At that meeting, they confirmed that they would not that they could not, they would not be attending the site to count each tree. So how are you going to hold the Highways England to account to ensure that every tree is replaced as they promise? Because if they don't know how many they're cutting down, how do they know how many to replace?
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Councillor Peafield. I'm going to refer you to the previous answer, but Mr. Mayor, there's a very important issue here that I'm going to raise, if you would allow me just a minute in response.
I will allow you a minute, Councillor Holmes.
Councillor Peafield, and by association, this will be also directed at the other political groups. Major improvements to the A38 junctions have been accepted, recognised and supported by multiple council administrations over many years. I note, however, that since the current administration took control of the council, it's only been the Conservative group that has expressed its support for a scheme that will bring huge benefits to Derby. And I believe it's vitally important that we seek absolute clarity on the support or otherwise of the scheme. Local residents, businesses, investors, stakeholders know the position of the current administration, but they must also know the clear positions of those who aspire to be in administration, Mr. Mayor. So in regards to Councillor Peafield's Labour group, along with the Liberal, Democrat and Reform groups, I believe it's only right that they make it very clear if they support this project. Make it very clear that they do. Maybe a joint statement via group leaders, for example. So once this is formally established, legitimate questions and challenges, which we're having tonight, several of them, whether directly raised with Highways England or the Council regarding mitigation and related concerns, will have a very clear context. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Holmes.
You did not answer my question, Mr. Holmes.
That can be referred outside this meeting. We're on to the next question from to Councillor Williams from Councillor Lind, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Lynn's question is, under proposals agreed at the last council meeting, can the Cabinet member give details of how many children from families in receipt of universal credit but not currently entitled to free school meals will be given lunches?
Councillor Lynn, supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please can the Cabinet member tell me if she's going to seek permission from the DWP to access this data or work with schools to collate this information? What is she going to do to implement the democratic will of this council?
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. The information held by the DWP is the residents' information. It is their permission that is needed to be sought. And I understand that that is for the government to do, not for the City Council.
Thank you. A question to a chairman of the Standards Committee, Councillor Shiraz Khan, from Councillor Alan Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Graves' senior's question to Councillor Khan as chair of the Standards Committee is, should allegations of impropriety in relation to the Market Hall project be investigated?
Councillor Graves, supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Khan. My question is much broader than a complaint about a councillor, and I am disappointed that officers have written this response for you. Despite reiterating several times that I wasn't making a complaint about a councillor, this question has been forced down this path. I think you, Councillor Khan, as the chairman of the Standards Committee, are the wrong person to answer. This question is about procurement procedures surrounding a contract on the Market Hall. My question, Councillor Khan, is, I suppose you cannot answer the more serious part of my question.
Councillor Khan?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Graves, for your question. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Probably I am not the person that should be answering this question for you. But because although I am the chair of the Standards Committee, upon which you are currently serving alongside me, my role is to make sure that any complaint is investigated thoroughly, transparently, and in accordance with the procedure and rules, so that a fair outcome is the end result. Since no complaint has been made to me or to the committee or to an officer regarding this issue, it would be wrong for me to make any comments about your question in which, I have no input. I don't know the ins and outs of what's happening in the Market Hall. So as the chair of Standards Committee, it would be wrong for me to make comments about an individual that's dealing with this. If your complaint is no, then it should be addressed to the cabinet member, leadership, or to the relevant officer. However, as I said, in my role as chair, if you was to make a complaint formal, then I can assure you of one thing, and that is that I will make sure, and I will leave no stone unturned, that the investigation is transparent, fair, and thorough, and to make sure, because like you, I want to make sure that the people of Derby are assured that their money is being well spent by the leadership. So until such time I receive a complaint from you or anybody else, I cannot comment upon this, right? But what I can, as I said, and I'm sorry to repeat it again, is to say to you that any kind of complaint received by me, I will make sure that it is investigated thoroughly, transparently, fairly, and in accordance with the procedures, and I will make sure that there is no comebacks on the committee for leaving any stone unturned.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Smale, question to you from Councillor Pattinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, sorry, Alex, you first.
No problem, Councillor Smale. Councillor Patterson's question is, does the Cabinet member think that political parties should be delivering leaflets door to door during the national lockdown?
Councillor Patterson, supplementary.
Mr. Mayor, I think I need to, because I was asking for a verbal response on the...
You're going to have a bit, right, okay, go ahead, Councillor Smale.
Hence why I jumped in, so I do apologise, Mr.
That's fine, don't worry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Clearly, political activity on the doorstep at the present time is at best not of the spirit of the law, nor helpful to the national efforts to protect the NHS and save lives. It's also not necessary. We all have a part and role to play in defeating this virus, and I agree that political parties at a national and local level should all lead by example. It has been widely reported that both main parties have ordered their own local members to suspend all leaflet deliveries until the lockdown has been eased. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smale. Councillor Patterson, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will the Cabinet member agree to seek assurances from all political groups in Derby that they have suspended leaflet deliveries until the lockdown is eased?
Councillor Smale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm very happy to do that. Better still, I believe we do have all the group leaders present on this meeting, and they may want to proactively confirm in the message chat bar of this system, which all councillors and officers have access to, or if not, they would like to email me directly to confirm that deliveries have been suspended. Thank you.
Right, next question again is to Councillor Smale from Councillor Ashburner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Ashburner's question is, will the council arrange to write to supermarkets, couriers and delivery companies to remind them of the damage parking on verges is causing during periods of wet weather?
Right, have you got a supplementary to that, Councillor Ashburner, to the answer?
I'm not sure whether he can actually hear us yet. He's been asking for help.
Can we move on and perhaps go back if we can, Alex, please?
I believe Councillor Ashburner is currently in contact with our technical support person. So if we move on, perhaps we can offer Councillor Ashburner a supplementary response at the end.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor, I do apologise. If Councillor Ashburner can't get on the call by the end of this meeting, I'm happy to have a follow-up conversation with Councillor Ashburner after this meeting. It's no problem.
That's very good of you, Councillor Smale. Thank you for that. Right, to Councillor M. Holmes from Councillor Kerr, please. Matthew Holmes.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. The question is, how are the quality of climate implications detailed in reports being monitored and developed?
Right, have you got a supplementary question, Councillor Kerr?
I do, yes, thank you. It's virtually 6 months since we as a council approved having climate implications on reports. Just 2 days under 6 months. When are we actually going to get this information so that we don't miss out on the opportunities to take forward the right decisions for Derby to become zero carbon?
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. As you're well aware, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and officers have had to juggle many things during this time. They're doing a fantastic job in keeping the services running in this council, and our forward plans being planned and presented, This is part of that ongoing work. I believe they will work on this as quickly as they can to conclusion. I'm confident in their response to this, and I would suggest that if you have any further concerns, that you raise them via the relevant scrutiny commissions that you take part in. Thank you.
Thank you. Question to Councillor Poulter from Councillor West. Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor West's question to Councillor Poulter is: have all points from the Council resolution of November 2018 in relation to modern slavery been implemented?
Councillor West, have you got a supplementary to Councillor Poulter?
I do, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Poulter. It is good that there is the requirement for review when contracting and recontracting. I would ask whether a requirement to check and question supply chain modern slavery could be included as part of the annual contract management process.
Councillor Poulter.
Thank you, Councillor West. We can have another look at that, but I have to say, as contract and procurement law is extremely complicated and very prescriptive, and as outlined in the original answer, it's not always possible to apply such contract conditions. Thank you.
Next
Thank
question.
you for agreeing to take a look, though.
Thank you, Councillor West. Thank you. Question to Councillor Williams from Councillor Edgergrave, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question is: what steps are the administration taking to ensure the contents of food parcels delivered to families in lieu of free school meals are sufficient, healthy and fresh?
Councillor Edgergrave, have you got a supplementary to Councillor Williams, please?
You read my mind, Mr. Mayor. I thank officers in schools for their work on this. Do you agree with me, Councillor, that it's scandalous, grotesque and bizarre that at this stage in the 21st century such a reassurance needs to be sought? And if you don't agree, why not?
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I absolutely agree that in that first week, some of the food parcels that were given out were absolutely scandalous and grotesque. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the third word you used. And, you know, that should not have happened. And, you know, I think the government's response to it was like yours. They were shocked at the standards. So that is my answer to that. I do not think that those food parcels that were shown on social media were of the standard that we would expect.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Question to Councillor Barker from Councillor Shanker, please, Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Shanker's question to Councillor Barker is: can the Cabinet member clarify what residents will receive in return for the £25 million investment in the Market Hall?
Councillor Shanker, have you got a supplementary to Councillor Barker?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the answer, Mr. Councillor Barker. It's obviously we still don't know what the scope of the project is, but can you please confirm what the council received for the circa £68,000 that was paid to Marketplace Management, and was this work competitively tendered? Councillor Barker.
You are talking of a figure that I'm not directly aware of, in as much that the consultancy fees have not been broken down to that extent to me. If you're talking specifically about the blog that's been circulating throughout the city, Derby City Council are a member of NAPMO, the National Association of British Market Authorities, and are entitled in their own right to go and seek advice in relation to market management and the construction of markets. That's what they did, and they negotiated through officers, through procurement, a consultancy relating to the interior of the market. I can assure you now, and assure every member of the council that is listening to this, I had nothing to do with it.
Right, question to Councillor Borston from Councillor Repton. Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Repton's question is: can you confirm what services the adult social care precept can be legally used for, and does this include children's services?
Councillor Repton.
Yes, please, a supplementary. If members scroll down this, because it's a very long and a long response and a quote from the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement provided the draft referendum proposal. It's like a classic out of Yes Minister, but in actual fact it doesn't answer the actual question, because I feel that that the recent Cabinet paper on meals for children that you approved is misleading the public, as at 7.2 it states the cost is to be funded from a maximum of 4.99% increase in council tax. And the draft medium-term financial plan already proposes to increase the core element of council tax by the maximum 1.99%. So I really do need to ask the fundamental question again. Is it legal to fund children's meals from the adult social care precept?
Councillor Ralston.
I refer you to the answer, Councillor Repton. Indeed, we've had this conversation several times. If you need further support in your ability to be able to understand this, the clarity is clear that the pot for budget that we can access is a combination of various different pots, and our if we scroll down to the slightly further on here to the bottom table that we can see, hopefully, you'll see that our adult social care pressures, including inflation and actually total 4.2, and any precept that would be raised, including up to the 2.99, would be 3.1. Therefore, it would leave us a £1.1 million headroom in terms of where we would get that funding from. Ultimately, that funding would have come from within the MTFP and the budget pots that we have to access that, in order to get the additional funding for the schools meal campaign that is happening across the city, which has been worked up by officers. The ability is therefore to increase the council social care council tax levy, which allows us to do that. So I think if you're still unclear on that and it's still not clear enough for you, then obviously we will sit down and we can give you the basics around the finances on this. But ultimately, that is the rationale for being able to do that, and the paper makes that extremely clear as to why we did that. And I think, what my question to you would be, if you continue
you can't ask questions to him, I'm sorry.
I'd like to know where his £2 million is that he'd like to put in.
Well, discuss it with him after the meeting. I haven't, not in this meeting.
I will do, Frank.
Right,
Thank
we'll
you very
carry
much.
on. Thank you. To the next question from Councillor
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Holmes. Okay, from Councillor Shanker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Shanker's question to Councillor Holmes is, please can the Cabinet member provide an update on the planning application to demolish the Assembly Rooms?
Have you got a supplementary, Councillor Shanker, please?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Holmes, for admitting you misled full council at the last meeting. It would have been the decent thing to send me, as the questioner, a copy of that communication. The draft planning report for the application recommends that planning for demolition is granted, subject to acceptable, firm and contracted proposals for what is to be put on that site. Why do you not admit your failure to refurbish the Assembly Rooms and ongoing failure to even demolish the building? Because you have no acceptable, firm and contracted plans in place.
Councillor Holmes.
I will not take accusations of failure from you, Councillor Shanker, for everything you did to this city as Banwait's right-hand man. But in answer to your question, officers are working incredibly hard on, and are progressing really well on this issue. And I refer you to my previous answer in terms of the next steps. It's now anticipated to bring the application forward to the next available committee for consideration as per due process.
Next question, Councillor Williams from Councillor Lind, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe this is the final question this evening.
No, I want to go back to Councillor Ashburner after this one, Alex, please.
Of course, yes.
Thank you.
Question from Councillor Lind to Councillor Williams. How many children and young people qualify for a tablet or laptop in Derby schools, and how many of these children and young people have yet to receive a tablet or laptop?
Councillor Lind, have you got a supplementary question, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please can the Cabinet member tell me how many children and young people are yet to receive a laptop or tablet in Derby primary schools, and how many are yet to receive a laptop or tablet in Derby secondary schools, as currently identified through the task group that has been established and through direct contact with schools.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Because we're not allowed to actually read out the answer that I'm going to give is what I'm going to read out. The council does not hold this information because the Department for Education is dealing directly with schools and not the councils. However, despite not having the numbers, as you've alluded to, as a Cabinet member, I have been proactive and I have agreed with the Strategic Director of Corporate Resources some dedicated financial resource from COVID funding provided to the council to support remote learning for the children and young people. The task group is in the early stages of being set up. However, my PACE team are currently working with all the schools to try and find those numbers out. Again, this is something that we do not collate if you had read the answer. However, like I said, the PACE team are working with all of our schools to try and find out if there are any gaps there. And we will then be working to ensure that we can try and make sure that those laptops, those devices, those dongles that are needed and required that are not being met by the government are met by this team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Before I go back to question R, is Councillor Ashburn available now, please?
I believe he has rejoined the call. Councillor Ashburn, can you?
Are you? Can you
yes,
answer,
I can
please?
hear you now.
Oh, thank you. So we'll go back to Councillor Ashburn's question to Councillor Smale. Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Ashburn's question to Councillor Smale was: will the council arrange to write to supermarkets, couriers and delivery companies to remind them of the damage parking on verges is causing during periods of wet weather?
Councillor Ashburn, have you got a supplementary question to Councillor Smale, please?
I've only just this second seen it.
Well, I'll give you a second or two to read through it.
Okay,
Go on.
right. Yeah. Okay. I won't ask a supplementary. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the late item that I indicated earlier I would take before motions. And this relates to the matter, a minute extract from last week's Council Cabinet meeting, which relates to the calculation of the Council tax base. Now, Councillor Ralston, in your position as Cabinet member, can I take your view on it, please?
Just move it's printed, please, Mr. Mayor.
Right, okay. Have we got a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Have we got any speakers, please? Anybody wish to speak? Right, I take it everybody is in favour and doesn't need to want to vote on the matter. Well, I take that. We'll go on to items 9 to 13 now. Five notices of motion. The first one is the responsibility for licensing, moved by Councillor Skelton and seconded by Councillor Atwell. Councillor Skelton, would you like to put your motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, we are bringing this motion as we are concerned that Councillor Barker's Cabinet portfolio is not compliant with the law and with the Council's constitution. If you look at the Council's website, where it details the Cabinet members' portfolios, Councillor Barker's lists various areas and then licensing, implying that everything to do with licensing is in his portfolio. This does not comply with the law or the Council's constitution. Now, the Council's constitution states that licensing committee will, within Council policies, 1, take decisions relating to licensing and appeal functions that would fall within the definition of key decisions if they were executive functions. 2, approve and amend policies relating to these functions. And 3, approve arrangements for meetings of subcommittees and panels unless otherwise determined by Council. So it's quite clear that policy matters and individual licence decisions are matters for the licensing committee. Policy decisions then go to full council for ratification. Cabinet does not have a role in this process. Not that many years ago, this council was unfortunately the subject of a public interest report by the council's external auditor. This happened due to poor governance practices, in the main, by the then leader of the council, Ranjit Banwade. Sadly, it seems others may be wanting to follow in his footsteps by not adhering to the Council's constitution and, by extension, the law. We have all seen Councillor Barker's appearances in the local media promoting his views and policies on licensing matters that are, according to the law, matters that are to be dealt with by the Licensing Committee and its subcommittees. According to this Council's constitution, it is full council that delegates licensing matters, including policy making, to the Licensing Committee. Therefore, this motion calls on the leader, Councillor Poulter, to put things right so that the Council complies with its own constitution and the letter and the spirit of the law. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Atwell, you're seconding this motion. Do you wish to speak now or reserve the right?
I wish to speak, Mr. Mayor, please.
Carry on, Councillor Atwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a shame that we're having to bring this motion to the Council, and I'm glad to second it for Councillor Roos-Skelton. The need for this motion is down to the actions of the Cabinet member, Councillor Barkin, thinking he has a jurisdiction over licensing, when in fact, under both the Local Government Act 2000 and the Council and Constitution, it is a non-executive function under the control of the Licensing Committee. It appears that Councillor Barker still thinks he's a policeman in the manner in which he has conducted himself regarding himself in the position of law enforcement over taxi drivers in particular. This is certainly what taxi drivers said to me. Many of them were residents in my ward and were expressed their frustrations to me as a local councillor. His remarks of over a year ago that he would not take a ride in one of the yellow taxis were particularly offensive to them, given the fact that taxi drivers are small business owners who have done so much to help communities in the COVID-19 pandemic. If this motion passes, to think he's above the law, as he appeared not to take legal advice over the market or regeneration project that he boasts about at every opportunity. By the way, on a related topic, we've seen in the media only over a week ago yet another example of I'm above the law behaviour, where he did not declare an interest in the president of the National Association of Market Authorities.
Can you keep the licensing council at
Yes, this is all related, Mr. Mayor.
Right,
in May 2020, where this project was discussed and included a direct reference to the involvement of that association. Of course, I apologise for placing many of the Tory group in a difficult situation to bring this motion before those such as Councillors Cooper, Hudson, Testro and others who do not like Councillor Marker much, knowing that the strong whip system is that group that has been instructed to either vote against or abstain on this motion. However, I will urge all those councillors in this group who have long had concerns about his man and autocratic behaviour to vote with their conscience for this motion. After all, as councillors, we have a duty to uphold the council's constitution and associated law, not the egos of particular members. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I refer to the start of the attitude of this Cabinet member thinking he's in an enforcement role over taxi drivers, contrary to the Council's constitution law. I will leave it to others to judge if his behaviour is a similar manner over other aspects of licensing, given pubs and watering holes, as we know, he does like a drink or two. Perhaps this fact, along with his remarks about taking a role, riding taxis with
Mr. Mayor, I must object to that. Can you ask
of a
him
committee,
to
rather?
Comment, please?
Just hold on a minute, please.
Than the
I
executive
don't want
function.
interruptions.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. That needs withdrawing. Councillor Atwell's out of order.
Councillor Holmes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hatwell, can
you.
you keep to the subject, please?
Yes, I
Thank
really
you.
do.
Right,
Than an executive function vested in one person, I urge all my fellow councillors to do the right thing by the confirmation of office and support of this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Atwell. I've got quite a few people want to speak. I'll start with
Mr. Mayor, on the
Marshall.
CP 64, may I raise a point of order? I believe that Councillor Atwell should be given the opportunity to withdraw part of that statement, the accusation towards Councillor Barker, and he should take that opportunity or risk a standards complaint. Thank you.
What part of it do you wish him to withdraw, Councillor Holmes?
Councillor Atwell knows full well what part it is. I'm not going to repeat it on a live session. Thank you, Councillor.
Right. Councillor Atwell, do you wish to withdraw anything that you've said?
Well, not really, because I don't think I've said anything derogatory. All I've mentioned is the council likes a good drink, like most of us do. What's the issue with that, Mr. Mayor?
Right. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Marshall, you've indicated you'd like to talk, please. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it brief, obviously, because there's quite a lot on the agenda. Mr. Mayor, as a former chair of licensing, twice, I was keen to speak on this motion. Mr. Mayor, at my recent Group of One AGM, which was held in a shower this year, it was debated, deliberated and voted on in between the body wash and shampooing, and it was unanimously decided to fully support this motion. as it makes absolutely no sense in having a licensing committee if its democratic decision is overridden by one individual. It wouldn't be as bad, Mr. Mayor, if that individual, whoever it was actually competent in their role and actually had an understanding about licensing laws and regulations. So this makes absolute common sense, and I fully support this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Ezra-Grape. Oh, sorry, Councillor Alan Graves first, please. Sorry, Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm still smiling over the last contribution. You'll be aware that I had a written agreement with the Conservative leadership that reflected the manifesto commitments of my group, the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, an agreement that committed the Council to a committee system from the current Cabinet system. Unfortunately, it seems the Conservatives tasted the extra special responsibility allowances and changed their minds in carrying out that agreement. We have two areas of operation that is classed as quasi-semi-judicial. One is planning and the other is licensing. These meetings should work under the committee-style system process, and so my group are all in favour of this motion that takes us a tiny bit closer to a committee system. My personal belief is that the Cabinet system is the preferred system of the Council officers on the basis that it is easier to control 8 councillors than it is to control 51. The Conservatives seem happier to take the extra allowances than to honour any agreement they might have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Graves. Councillor Ezra-Grape.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, fellow councillors, it's timely and apposite that this motion should be tabled for the reasons I shall make plain. It's an established principle in developed and healthy democracies worldwide that there should be a separation of powers between the executive, our council cabinet, and the legislature, our full council and committees. The reason is simple and fundamental. The executive needs to be challenged and held to account by a body or bodies other than itself, with no intermingling of the two, in order to provide transparency and scrutiny, and with the hope of providing better democratic decision-making with checks and balances in the process. We've all seen recent and alarming tumultuous events across the Atlantic where the constitution of that country, the United States, was put to the test. This council also has a constitution, and I would submit that in the spirit of the Constitution is to underpin the centrality of democracy and accountability, coherently reducing this to writing. I would also respectfully remind councillors that constitutions are living documents and do need amending when it becomes clear that there are flaws or shortcomings. We've seen an improvement over recent years in which cabinet members from the administration have also concurrently been appointed to our General Taxi and Licensing Committee. One such member of the cabinet served on the committee until the 20th of June 2020, in the latter stages taking the office of chair, if I'm not mistaken. We currently have a different cabinet member on this committee. Of course, both these appointments were repeatedly supported by a coalition of councillors who signed up to this at successive annual general meetings, without being mindful of the spirit of our constitution and the way it was being eroded. We have here in this motion a partial remedy and mechanism to address some grey areas of our constitution, although it doesn't address the fundamental issue of the separation of powers, and it does require the gracious acquiescence of the leader of the council. Cometh the man, cometh the hour? We'll see on that. It's rather telling, by the way, that this minority administration is in such contempt of its own backbench Conservative members that it doesn't trust any of them to take that place on the committee reserved for their group through Widdicombe, which is currently being occupied by a member of the Cabinet. If this minority administration can't trust and count on the support of all its own group members, what does that tell us and the people of Derby about it? Of course, it tells us and the people of Derby a lot, and frankly, the city deserves better, Mr. Mayor. I support this motion, but I don't hold my breath on it being very productive.
Before we go on, I remind people, and the legal officers remind me of that they should actually always have a code of conduct regarding the way that they talk about other people and treating people with respect, and that accounts to all councillors. So we now go on and don't want any more repeats of disrespect to other councillors. Councillor Alison Holmes has indicated she wants to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion is flawed in that while a majority of licensing functions are non-executive, there are exceptions for elements not captured in the legislation, which has to then default to the executive decision. I have grave misgivings about the intent of this motion brought by the Chair of Licensing and the Liberal Democrat group. Having already removed the Conservative group from chair and vice chairs, they now want to remove governance in the form of the cabinet member. The KC&J reports gave us all the reasons to tighten up weak and ineffective governance, which led to the appalling events in Rotherham. And let us remember, those events also happened in the city. This city we are all responsible for. We have a duty to keep the citizens of Derby safe by promoting safeguarding and the welfare of children. Therefore, our group cannot support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Just one thing, Councillor Alison Holmes. This wasn't brought at this motion by the Chair of Licensing. It was brought by the leader of the Liberal Democrats. He seconded it, but he did not bring it, this motion. Thank you. Right, Councillor Shiraz Khan's indicated he'd like to make a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's quite noticeable, actually, that Councillor Holmes and his colleagues can't take what they dish out. They continually, at every opportunity, make disparaging remarks about a former councillor from here. And indeed, tonight, Councillor Holmes said to Councillor Schenkel that he was the right-hand man of former Councillor Banway. It seems that it's okay for them to talk disparagingly about a former councillor, but if somebody is actually telling the truth about one of their own councillors, they want him to withdraw the remarks and threaten him with the standards committee. But such is the Conservative way at the moment that they're falling over themselves to try and contradict each other. But anyway, going back to the motion, I welcome this motion because it gives an air of transparency and confidence to the general public that the decisions being made are made by those who sit on the committee and therefore see things at ground level and base their decisions on knowledge of the circumstances and not because it's their view of things. The committee is there to make decisions on evidence and not basically to have premeditated views. I personally don't have anything against Councillor Barker. He and I get on fine. We have a laugh and joke. I didn't think he was a competent chair when he was there, and I certainly wouldn't like him to be making decisions when he's not even involved in that committee. So, as I said, I don't have anything against him or any other member, but I did not think he was competent, and I still believe that he's not competent. But I believe that whoever is sitting on the licensing committee has a group of experienced officers who can, if needed, guide the committee to sort of the ins and outs of what's going to happen if they make decisions of whatever nature. And there is absolutely no need for a cabinet member who doesn't know what's going on and wasn't a competent chair at any level anyway, for him to be involved in making a decision of which he took no part in. I think the confidence of the general public, the licensing trade, whether they be taxi drivers or pubs, clubs, restaurants, etc., will be greatly enhanced by the knowledge that the people making the decisions are those that are sit on the committee and look at their application, see the evidence both for and against. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Poulter, you've indicated, I think you're the last one. Would you like to make your point of view, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Saddened by this, to be honest, saddened because, as anticipated, this is clearly to do with licensing. This is clearly an orchestrated political and personal attack on members of this council. Shocked by the manner in which things have been said, to the point that the monitor officers had to remind people that they need to treat members of the council with respect, and unfortunately I think Councillor Khan might find himself being rather busy as chair of the Standards Committee as a result of what's been said here tonight and not been retracted. This motion is flawed in the first place anyway. Councillor Skelton's comments and thoughts in relation to the legitimacy of us having a cabinet member responsible to oversee licences misplaced. The legal advice and the advice from member services we've received clearly is that our constitution allows for the non-executive functions in relation to licensing matters described by various people is clearly delegated to the licensing committee, but that's not confined just to taxi matters. It covers a whole raft of matters, and the advice is that clearly some of those matters that might pertain to licensing have relevance and have to be decided and are relevant to the executive of the council. I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, that if I am the last contributor, I would suggest and ask you, if you wouldn't mind asking the monitoring officer if she can give any further clarity on that point, as we have been advised. After that, I'm afraid this is just purely and simply a personal attack and a political attack with no real reference to licensing. Councillor Atwell refers to discussions and strategies and policies that were discussed and dealt with in licensing previously, and if in actual fact there are members who have made comments tonight from the Labour group of this council who actually, when they were in charge and responsible for the matter, I think if I'm not mistaken it was Councillor Schenker, who actually imposed on the licensing committee a point system for taxi drivers. It wasn't agreed or discussed or passed by the licensing committee. It was imposed by the Labour administration in that respect. So it's a little bit disingenuous of members from other groups to suggest that we as an administration are out of line. And actually I challenge any member of the licensing committee to quote any interference in the business of the licensing committee since we've had a new chair in Councillor Atwell. As far to my knowledge, none of the cabinet, the executive, or even members of my group have made any interference in the conduct of the licensing committee. So this is unfounded and unnecessary. I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, if you wouldn't mind seeking clarity from the legal officer in respect to that, and we'll deal with the ramifications of all this at a later stage. Just to say that as leader of the council, I'm extremely disappointed by the conduct of some members here tonight, and I have to say, if as it seems likely this motion is passed, then again I'm advised that as leader of the council on a strong leader model, it's entirely within my gift to have a cabinet member or have a cabinet responsibility for whatever portfolio I see fit, and I see fit to have a cabinet member, the cabinet member for governance, to have oversight of the actions and conduct of the licensing committee for the reasons as outlined by Councillor Alison Holmes. I am not prepared as leader of this council to risk any malpractice in the licensing committee such as that dealt with by the Casey report and others which this city has suffered from in the past. So I can assure council that if it comes to me to make that decision, there will be no change in the way that the administration deals with this issue. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Poulter. There's been no indication of many of the things that you've said. Before I ask the monitoring officer to make any comments she wishes to make, I have no doubt that the proposer, who has the right to come back before we take a vote, will answer your comments. The monitoring officer, do you wish to make any comments?
I'm happy to make some points of clarification, Mr. Mayor, if you wish me to.
Well, if you want to make them as quickly as we can so we can move on, please.
That's fine. I'd like to make a couple of points, please. Councillor Poulter made some extremely valid points in his response. He was correct to state that the cabinet portfolios and their names and how they are structured is entirely within the gift of the leader of the council. The current structure of those portfolios is entirely in line with our constitution, and there is nothing inappropriate about there being a cabinet member who has the executive functions of our licensing function within his portfolio, and that is the case in many councils across the country. It's clear that there are both non-executive and executive functions relating to licensing, and yes, the non-executive functions are correctly delegated by full council to licensing committee. No evidence has been presented to me that there has been any interference with the performance of those non-executive functions delegated to licensing committee by Councillor Barker, and therefore there is no concern on those regards.
Thank you for that.
I would also just like to make one final point, Mr. Mayor, that the remainder of the motion simply restates our current constitution. It seeks to make no changes, and I need to make that perfectly clear, that in setting it out the way it is, it makes no change to our current constitution. Thank you.
Right, we'll go back. Councillor Skelton, would you wish now to sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do wish to do that. I would wish to make some points that address some points that some councillors seem to be unclear about. Councillor Alison Holmes refers to areas of the law within licensing, the 2000 Act, where it's not clear. And she says that automatically defaults to Cabinet. No, it doesn't. It's full council that has the full powers, and they delegate that to the licensing committee. So she's totally wrong on that. And when Councillor Poulter is saying that the cabinet member should have oversight of the licensing committee, not when the licensing committee is dealing with matters that quite clearly in law and in our constitution are delegated to that licensing committee. So, and I brought this motion because we need some clarity on and restating what our constitution says, and for all councillors to actually have a clear understanding of the law. It might be as well that we maybe get some council's opinion, such as that of James Button QC, as he's the leading lawyer in this area in the country. But my point in bringing this motion was to get a restating of what the law is and of what our constitution says, and so that then the cabinet are quite clear, which unfortunately it seems they're not, quite clear on what they can do and what they can't do. So I would be very happy that if councillors would support this, to restate what the law is and what our constitution is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right,
Mr. Mayor, under Mr. Mayor, under CP64, can we have Emily to relay what she put in the chat, please, so that it can be heard live? Thank you.
Yeah, I will allow it, but I do feel that we must get on with this particular motion, because I've gone back to the original proposer, and it's unfair that she doesn't have the chance to answer anything else that's said on this motion. So I will go back to it. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's of great importance, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Holmes, will you let me talk, please? Thank you. I'll go back to the monitoring officer, but I'll allow Councillor Skelton to make any other points she made. I will finish there and go to a vote. Thank you.
Thank
Right.
you, Mr. Mayor. Is it me next? Yes.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to state that, firstly, following receipt of this motion, I did take council's advice to ensure that I had absolute clarity on the law in this area. I'd like to make it absolutely clear that unless anything that is not specified in law as being a non-executive function automatically defaults to being an executive function. So if there is a lack of clarity or specification in the law, then that defaults to the executive. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Councillor Skelton, would you like to add to anything? Councillor Skelton?
I've just looked in the chat and I can see Councillor Ingle is now wanting a question.
Well, I'd like to go back to Councillor. No, he can't. I've got to a situation where I've called for Councillor Skelton at the end of questions as far as I'm concerned. I wish to get on with this. Councillor Skelton, have you any final thing to say, please?
Basically to say that this motion is good as it stands. And there is no problem with it legally or any other reason. So I would still ask councillors to all vote in favour of this for openness and transparency within our constitution. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Right, we're going to a vote. Any other comments? Right, we'll go to a vote then. Alex, would you conduct a vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I read councillors' names, would they please indicate whether they are for or against the motion as it is printed in their agenda booklet, please? Councillor Ashburner, please.
For.
Councillor Atwell.
For.
Councillor Barker.
Against.
Councillor Kerr.
For.
Councillor Carr.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
Against.
Councillor Dinser.
For.
Councillor Eldrit. Councillor Eldritch, please.
Abstain.
Councillor Evans, please.
Abstain.
Councillor Froggatt. Councillor Froggatt, please. Councillor Graves Jr., please.
For.
Councillor Graves Senior, please.
For.
Councillor Hassel.
Against.
Councillor Hazelgrave.
For.
Councillor Alison Holmes.
100% against.
Councillor Matthew Holmes.
Absolutely against.
Councillor Hudson.
Very much against.
Councillor Hussain.
100% for.
Councillor Ingle.
Abstain. I'm disappointed I wasn't allowed to speak, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jangir Khan.
For.
Councillor Shiraz Khan.
For.
Councillor Kuss.
For.
Councillor Lind.
For.
Councillor Marshall.
For.
Councillor McChrystal.
Against.
Councillor Nater.
For.
Councillor Nawaz.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
Against.
Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Peatfield.
Abstain.
Councillor Adrian Pegg.
Against.
Councillor Paul Pegg.
Abstain.
Councillor Potter.
Against.
Councillor Poulter.
Against.
Councillor Repton.
For.
Councillor Ralston.
Against.
Councillor Russell, please.
Abstain.
Councillor Sandhu, please. Councillor Sandhu, please.
For.
Sorry, just to confirm, that was for, was it, Councillor Sandhu?
Yeah, for.
Thank you. Councillor Shanker.
For.
Councillor Skelton.
For.
Councillor Smale.
Against.
Councillor Stanton.
Abstain.
Councillor Testro.
Against.
Councillor Webb.
Against.
Councillor West, please.
For.
Councillor Williams, please.
Against, please.
Councillor Willoughby.
For.
Councillor Wood.
Against.
And finally, the Mayor, Councillor Harwood, please.
For.
Please bear with us one moment, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, just to confirm, the motion is carried by 24 votes to 18 with 7 abstentions.
Thank you, Alex. We'll go on to item 10 on the agenda, protecting the National Health Service, moved by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Willoughby. Councillor Kerr, would you like to put your motion, please?
I would indeed, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues, hopefully everyone has picked up the publicity this week about Brilliant Derby, with which the Council aims to improve the mental health of people across the city. COVID restrictions are certainly getting people down, and we know that there are real concerns that mental health will be an ongoing issue. However, physical health is also an issue, and has been for as long as anyone can remember. We know that life expectancy and healthy life expectancy varies significantly across the city. This is something that we have needed to address regardless of any pandemic, but the pandemic has highlighted it again. People at greatest risk of COVID are broadly from the same groups as those most likely to be suffering poor health anyway, and most likely to be calling on the services of the NHS. And in fact, it may even be worse at the moment because of the government's messaging. What do you think when you hear or read, stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives? For some people at least, there is a guilt trip. If you live at home, leave home, or even think about contacting your GP. Protect the NHS. Is there any other way that the man or woman in the street can help protect the NHS than simply staying at home and not bothering them? I wonder if this is one of the reasons why we know that last spring people weren't getting in touch about early signs of cancer or heart disease or a stroke or any one of a number of other health issues for which they would normally ask advice. So what should the Council be doing to protect the NHS? We know that every winter the number of ill people increases. Hospital beds fill up. Slips and falls, infections and more mean that people are not well. One of the Council's roles is to try to keep people healthier and reduce this winter ill health. Loads of Council services can and do make a difference. Whether it's supporting vulnerable children, adults and families, providing advice on healthy homes, encouraging people to exercise, to give up smoking, to cut down on drinking or lose weight. We're already doing these and more, and it is making a difference. Another thing that the pandemic has done is highlight how we are all in it together, that everyone matters and everyone can help. Crucially, it has highlighted that the Council doesn't need to solve everything by itself. For example, the support being given to homeless people in Derby has been transformed over the last couple of years. Yes, change was already happening before lockdown. Derby Homes took up a more proactive role to meet the needs of a wide range of people who become homeless. They have been coordinating support from a wide range of partners, housing associations, charities, faith groups and more. And they have been showing that this cross-sector way of working, well, works. In the midst of the pandemic, we had another example of people from different areas coming together to help those that needed it. It's centred around the Council's community hub, but drew in people from a wide range of organisations and none. One outcome of this has been the Food for Thought Alliance, another body leading action in Derby to make a difference. This is the new, but also the old way of doing things. Community-led, but with access to experience and expertise. The Council is already working down a similar route in other areas too. Delivering a zero-carbon Derby has the Climate Commission, chaired by a university dean, but involving people from many different organisations. The Poverty Commission is also being led by a dean, this time from the Cathedral. The vision in this motion is to make a difference to the physical health of the people of Derby. Again, we need to go beyond the Council. This shouldn't be another burden on public health, who are already feeling flattened by the key role they have around the pandemic. And it doesn't need to start immediately. There is a chronic problem with ill health, not a sudden emergency. But we should make it happen because the NHS is so under pressure at the moment. Let's engage with the many people who aren't the Council to expand health improving activity. and people's knowledge about healthy lifestyles. We need a new way of coordinating activity and bringing people together to make a difference. As a working title, let me call this new grouping Team Health. Like Derby's offer to homeless people and its action to ensure people have food, Team Health doesn't need to be led by the Council, but it will help the Council meet its statutory duties. Of course, Team Health should involve professionals working in health, but not just the NHS. It needs to include private practitioners, pharmacists, physios, chiropractors, counsellors and more. Team Health also needs to engage with communities through faith groups, youth groups, sports clubs and other community-based groups. This is what I'd like this motion to achieve, but let's not run before we can walk. I recognise that there may not be capacity to set up this just now, though opinion poll research suggests that now might be a good time. But let us reach out and strengthen contacts with the community. Let's make sure that people feel empowered to share health information and healthy living advice. Let's share that vision of better health for everyone in Derby and ask who wants to help more and more people embrace it. These may become the key partners to make Team Health happen. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Willoughby, you're seconding this motion. Do you wish to speak now or speak later?
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to formally second this motion and reserve my right to speak later, please. Thank you.
Have we got any other speakers, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've indicated I want to speak.
Right, I've got your name, but I didn't know you want to speak. Okay, Fareed, you may speak. Councillor Said.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a very timely debate. We are adversely affected by coronavirus, and many people in our localities are dying each week. But those of you who've been in the council chamber or on the council for long enough, you will remember back in 1993, there was a public health physician by the name of Dr. Whitehead. It was the first time he got some figures together and he spoke in the council chamber. And he came up with information which left most councillors who were in attendance in a shock. For the first time, he drew to our attention the fact that people who were living in Elstree could expect to live on average 10 years longer than those people who were living in the private wards like Arboretum and Normanton. The life expectancy gap then was around 9-10 years. If we look at the life expectancy gap now between, say, our affluent areas and the most deprived areas, my guess is it has increased to somewhere around 13 years. So obviously the council and other professionals who are associated with this type of work, they've been doing what they could to stop the gap getting wider. But that's not been enough. So I agree with Councillor Kerr that we need to look at the whole approach that we've adopted so far and have a serious rethink what else could be done, and some of the initiatives or suggestions that are incorporated in the motion are to go somewhere to make sure that there is some sort of equity when it comes to life and death matters. Now, getting on to the coronavirus, obviously it's affected poorer communities more than the more affluent communities. But let me give you some figures which I've taken today. United Kingdom has now got the fifth highest death toll in the whole of the world. The comparison figures were taken from 199 countries in the world, and we've got the fifth highest death toll per million population. Now, the deaths per million are 1,372 in UK and 589 per million in Germany. So obviously there is something being done in Germany which we've not been able to do for whatever reason. So in terms of the government approach, I was reading the Sunday paper, and the Sunday papers actually generally, quite a few of them, describe the government approach as haphazard, and they felt that it was like, in cricketing terms, that our Prime Minister dives to stop the ball from getting to the boundary when it has already got to the boundary. So he's making untimely dives here and there in an effort to stop the ball, but the ball's already gone to the boundary before he dives. So he's leaving everything so late. Whatever he comes up with is not timely and is not really being proactive enough, in my view. He's reacting to pressure from various pressure groups, and then he puts or cobbles something together very quickly, and then next minute he changes his mind. Nobody really is sure whether he has got a thought-through approach to dealing with this. Getting back to the
30 seconds.
Getting back to the local motion, I think we could all play a part in it, and it can't be left to the statutory organisations. And I think it's a good opportunity that has been created by this motion here for us to have a serious rethink and look at what part we could play to make sure that we are able to make some difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sain. Right on time. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to welcome Lucy's comments. She can write my adult social care portfolio for me. Brilliant, Derby. The work that we're doing with the homeless, the work that's been carried out through our Health and Wellbeing Board, that Lucy is a part of, so she knows exactly what we're doing with regard to healthy housing, with regard to childhood obesity, sexual health services, and reducing health inequalities. We have one nationally recognised service that's run with this council, and that is our Live Well programme. And that Live Well programme delivers, even though we're in a pandemic, through Facebook and Twitter and online, Men's Health Week, Stoptober, ovarian cancer, dementia awareness, Blood Pressure UK's Know Your Numbers Week, mental health awareness, Help Us Help You cancer service, 1U, including vitamin D, Lucy, which the government has announced that clinically extremely vulnerable people are to get a free 4-month supply of vitamin D. Change for Life, COPD, Better Health, Flu, Quit for COVID, that's your smoking, and many more. It shares and endorses partner posts, which is a point that Lucy's making in her motion, to help spread important messages. But this can be done by local members. You can put the messages that Live Well put out, that our comms team put out, that our public health team have been working on for not just the pandemic, but for a long time now. They've included winter health messaging, particularly at the arena, Lucy, where you went recently. Public health and comms have provided press releases on staying well in winter, are doing briefings this week to the Access Equality and Inclusion Hub and the Race Equality Hub. And in addition, we've got Brilliant Derby. Dr. Andy Cope, who is the Joe Wicks of well-being workouts, launched Brilliant Derby via YouTube on Monday to promote happiness, well-being and resilience across the city. So yes, as you say in your motion, Lucy, at the bottom, as you can see, publicity is still ongoing. You say the public health team within the council should be working. They are working creatively with our marketing teams, with community volunteers across the city, and with our NHS colleagues to ensure that ongoing messages about health promotion, including winter health, smoking cessation, reproductive choice, weight control, healthy exercise and vitamin D supplements continue to be spread across our communities despite the challenges of lockdown. Lucy, I can say thank you for promoting what I have been doing over the last 2 years, and my group will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Again, very, very good on time. Right, anybody else like to speak? Right, we'll go back to the seconder of the motion then. Councillor Willoughby.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes, fine, thank you.
This motion, because we've all seen how important the NHS has been during this COVID-19 pandemic, of course, which other speakers have, of course, referred to. And the driving factor around all the COVID-19 measures has been and should be to manage the load on the vital key workers in the NHS. So therefore, I think going forward, that is equally important to ensure there are messages about health promotion in other areas called for by this motion to prevent issues with non-COVID related illnesses as well as COVID-19 will of course also have a knock-on effect in reducing overall load on the NHS at this critical time. As Councillor said in her speech to propose this motion, I also think it will be great to use this as another area of partnership working together with the Council, as is occurring with the COVID-19 Community Hub and Derby Food for Thought Alliance that, of course, Councillor Kerr referred to. A true example, if you remember the phrase, the big society a few years ago, which I personally was, very much enthusiastic about, all these different partnership working and groups and community groups and things working together that we're seeing now on this. And it's a true example of that big society way of working. So I do hope the Council will work with these groups and use all available channels to communicate these messages, as others have said, other speakers have said. So therefore, I urge everyone to please join me in supporting this motion. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Willoughby. Does anybody wish to move to a vote, or are we all in favour?
Chair, may I just come back?
You can in a moment, Lucy, yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, just on a moment. Councillor Kerr, will you sum up then, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I thank the speakers for being so positive about this? Clearly, from what Councillor Hussain said, this is an issue that we do need to do more for. It's great that, as Roy said, that we are doing what we are doing. And he listed a whole lot of things that I hadn't included in my speech, but they are still there as well. But we need to do more, and particularly at the moment, not everybody is on social media. We need to do more active and empowerment type engaging with the communities, because at the moment we're still seeing that difference in healthy life expectancy and life expectancy. We can't rest on our laurels. We need to be doing more. So that's why it's so important that we look at this creatively. We look at this with community volunteers, and we need to be, hopefully, and I'd love to work with you on this, Councillor Webb, seeing how we can take this forward as another partnership working fully across the city. Thank you for everyone who gives it support.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. As I said, does anybody want to have a vote, or are we all in favour of this motion? I take it we're all in favour. Okay. Yeah. I take it we're all in favour. So we can go on and accept the fact that this motion has been carried. Okay?
Yes.
Right, I'll go on to item 11 then. And again, it relates to the National Health Service. This one, National Health Service Volunteer Support, moved by Councillor Lynn, second by Councillor Nater. Councillor Lynn, would you like to move your motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, because it's being reported that the government has done another U-turn and the following non-clinical modules have been removed: conflict resolution, moving and handling, fire safety, preventing radicalisation, safeguarding children level 1, I am happy to request the withdrawal of this motion under CP 53, Mr. Mayor.
Right, okay. Well, as far as I'm concerned, if that is your wish and it is accepted by the seconder, that this motion can be withdrawn. Thank you.
I'm happy to withdraw the motion, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. That motion is withdrawn. We go on to the next motion, item 12, the electoral cycle, being put by Councillor Shanker, seconded by Councillor Russell. Councillor Shanker, would you like to put your motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council will recall local elections due last year, soon after the start of the pandemic, were postponed, and that decision wasn't taken until the early part of March last year. I'm sure we all would have liked to see the country as a whole be coming out of the pandemic by now, but actually, unfortunately, we're now in a third lockdown and sadly currently seeing an ever-increasing loss of life. Whilst I firmly believe all steps should be taken to ensure safe elections can take place this coming May, we must accept the challenges this causes whilst dealing with the rollout of the vaccination programme and other COVID responses and the recovery. The government has again been extremely slow on making its position clear, which unfortunately only adds more uncertainty for all and increases workloads for officers that are dealing with the elections. After public consultation last year, Mr. Mayor, we'll all remember, and just to remind members, one of the best consultations this council has ever conducted in terms of the numbers responding. Residents we represent, our business community and our partner organisations sent us a very clear message. In fact, 82% have said get on with it and move to whole council elections. Mr. Mayor, I will not repeat the clear advantages around economic stability, financial savings, better planning, more confidence in our city that four-year electoral cycles offer. But what I will clearly say, and again, we all must appreciate, is that going to the polls for a third of the council later this year, maybe October, maybe November, if the May elections are called off, then going back to the polls next May for another third of the council, and then 12 months after that, going back for the remaining third of the council is just crazy and a complete waste of public funds. And as the motion states, may in fact hinder our city's recovery from the pandemic. Due to the total lack of leadership within Derby Conservative Group, who decided to put themselves before the 82% of respondents that favoured all council elections, the opportunity was lost last year to take that historic decision for our city. The motion today has been carefully worded to ensure that if elections due on May the 6th this year are postponed again, we ask officers to bring back a report to full council that examines the implications of moving to all council elections from May 2022. We can then make an informed decision on how to proceed. The reasons being put forward to not do this just a few months ago have all but completely been silenced. Who's even heard of local government reorganisation in recent months? It's a massive and sensible step to take. It's an obvious consideration we should make, and in doing so is a huge advantage for our city. I see no reason whatsoever for any member who's concerned about the prosperity of our city and our residents to not support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shanker. Councillor Russell, would you like to speak now or reserve the right?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I formally second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Okay. Councillor Alan Graves, you wish to speak on this motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am disappointed that the Labour leader has brought this to the Council as a motion when the whole Council has already had a vote on this subject and made a decision. My group have mixed views on all-out elections. There are positives and there are negatives, which I do not wish to rehearse all over again, Mr. Mayor. This is one of those motions that shouldn't have come back to the Council for a second discussion, and although I support all-out elections personally, I cannot support this motion as it flies in the face of democracy. We are custodians of the Council and custodians of the decisions we make. It is a responsibility that we should all take seriously. Unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, I think this is opportunistic gerrymandering of the highest grade. Furthermore, Mr. Mayor, it tries to commit the Council to an unknown. If this happens, then we can do this. Do we really want to make a decision based on an unknown? Imagine if this style of motion became the norm. We vote on something based on what might or might not happen. We would soon become a laughing stock. I know Councillor Shanker is trying to embarrass the Conservatives Council leadership, but I think there are lots of other issues he could have picked. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'd like to certainly start by talking about the local elections. I would consider it very, very serious if yet again the government decided that they were going to postpone or even cancel the elections. It's just not acceptable. We've seen in other countries such as South Korea, New Zealand, even obviously the USA, having elections, in fact, general elections in our terms. The Netherlands is going to have a general election in March, and I think Germany is in September. So I see absolutely no reason why the government legitimately should postpone elections. We have the facility to do postal voting for those who want to, who don't wish to turn up in person to a polling station. There are ways of counting votes after the polls are closed that will make sure that people are just in small bubbles and obviously not in a large group. So logistically, I think it is quite feasible to do this. So I can only think that the reason is that the Conservatives, for some reason, don't want to have elections, which is just not acceptable. My group will be having a free vote on this issue, but I would also add that the Boundary Commission, I think back end of this year, probably December time, will be finishing their report on the city, because currently they are looking at adjusting some of our internal ward boundaries in order to even up the number of electors living in each ward. Now, after they've done that, there will have to be all-up elections, and I'm sure that the way the central government obviously currently their thinking is that we will probably be forced after that for every 4 years to have elections of all seats. So to me, this is a little bit what's the word, I suppose, premature. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay. As it's going to happen, we are going to get an all-up election either in 2022, maybe 2023. So for me, I think I will probably be abstaining on the matter. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Skelton. I understand that you're right. 2023 could well be the year that boundary changes would take place. Councillor Poulter.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much.
Whilst I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Graves in his assessment that this is an opportunistic chance for Councillor Shanker to raise one of his hobby horses again, there are different circumstances in this particular case, and Councillor Shanker needs to be a little bit careful what he wishes for, because I know that he doesn't know what his group think in general in relation to this, and he might be surprised by some of their responses.
Councillor Poulter, please. Don't keep referring to people, please. Can you just make your point, please, without going across of what I consider to be against what exactly we said earlier, naming people. Please try and put your point without that. Thank you.
Well, everybody else seems to manage to do it, but I'm just making...
Not you. You're the leader of the council, so I expect you not to. Okay.
I'm making the point. Can I say that I agree with Councillor Graves?
Yes, of course you can. Yeah.
Can I say that I disagree with Councillor Shanker?
Yeah, that's right. Just disagree. That's fine.
That's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, there are different circumstances here, Mr. Mayor, in that I actually completely agree that should, and that's what the motion says, should the elections be cancelled for May and rearranged for later in the year, it's absolutely common sense that the council would need to look at its position again in relation to the ramifications of that, the cost and whatever other issues there might be around, and how it might pertain to if and when we take on all-out elections. And so we will be supporting this motion on that basis. But I have to say, the reference to nobody talking about local government reorganisation is not accurate. It's not gone away. It's on hold. It may or may not resurface as an issue before the 2022 elections or 23 elections. But what I do know is that this council is going to be subject to consultation by and with the Local Government Reorganisation Boundary Commission in the next 12 months, and that will have a very relevant effect on the decision as to when all-out elections occur, because it's very likely, it appears on the figures that they have, that there will be boundary changes and potentially changes to the numbers of councillors on the council, and in those circumstances that can only be dealt with by way of all-out elections. So it's absolutely appropriate that we ask for a report on those circumstances and anything else relevant to elections in the city, so we can support it on the basis that we'll agree to that if and when the May elections are cancelled.
Put back, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Poulter. Councillor Russell, as the seconder, and now is your opportunity to make any points you wish to make.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that obviously I'm seconding this motion this evening. It's nothing to do with opportunism. I'm not going to be mentioning any other councillors other than to say that I'm very pleased that Councillor Poulter has told us that his group will support the motion. It's a very straightforward principle. It's very simple. It's a proposition to ensure that should the local elections be delayed once again, and of course I hope that is not the case, because none of us want to see democracy delayed. The people of Derby need to be able to go to the polls, the sooner the better in my view, and hopefully that will go ahead in May. However, if that is not the case, it seems perfectly sensible and prudent for us as a local authority to consider our position in terms of all-out elections at that point. That is all that this motion is seeking to do, and I think it's fine for us to agree to that and review that at that stage if the elections don't go ahead in May. Of course, then I would be personally supporting the proposal to move to all-out elections for the reasons that we know and are well rehearsed in various debates throughout the council chamber and online. So yes, please support the motion is all I would say. In the event that the May elections don't go ahead, we will have further opportunity to discuss it then.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Councillor Shanker, would you like to sum up, please?
I'm happy, Mr. Mayor, to move move to the vote. Councillor
Very good, thank you.
I think has made an excellent job of just rounding up on the issues.
Thank you, Councillor Shunker. Right, we'll move to a vote. Alex, can you conduct a vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I read councillors' names, will they please indicate if they are?
We've lost you.
Sorry, Councillor. Slight issue with my microphone. I just
I see.
had a dodgy
Okay.
connection.
Yeah.
But when I read councillors' names, will they indicate whether they are for or against the motion as it's printed in the agenda, please? Councillor Ashburner, please.
Abstain.
Councillor Atwell.
For.
Councillor Barker, please.
For.
Councillor Bettany.
Against.
Councillor Kerr.
I'm going to vote against.
Councillor Carr, please.
Abstain.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Dinser.
For.
Councillor Eldritch. Councillor Eldritch, please. Councillor Evans, please.
Against.
Councillor Froggatt. Councillor Froggatt, please. Councillor Graves Jr.
I think I'll abstain.
Councillor Graves Senior, please.
Against.
Councillor Hassel.
For.
Councillor Hesselgrave.
For.
Councillor Alison Holmes.
For.
Councillor Matthew Holmes.
For.
Councillor Hudson.
For.
Councillor Hussain.
For.
Councillor Ingle.
For.
Councillor Jangir Khan.
For.
Councillor Shiraz Khan.
For.
Councillor Kuss.
Against.
Councillor Lind, please.
Abstain.
Councillor Marshall.
For.
Councillor McChrystal.
For.
Councillor Nater.
For.
Councillor Nawaz.
For.
Councillor Patterson. Sorry, Councillor Patterson, please. Councillor Pearce.
For.
Councillor Peatfield.
For.
Councillor Adrian Pegg.
For.
Councillor Paul Pegg.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Poulter.
For.
Councillor Repton, please.
For.
Councillor Ralston.
For.
Councillor Russell.
For.
Councillor Sandhu.
For.
Councillor Shanker.
For.
Councillor Skelton.
Abstain.
Councillor Smale.
For.
Councillor Stanton.
For.
Councillor Testro.
For.
Councillor Webb.
For.
Councillor West.
For.
Councillor Williams.
For, please, Alex.
Thank you. Councillor Willoughby.
For, please.
Councillor Wood.
For.
And the Mayor, Councillor Harwood, please.
For.
And just before we conclude, can I just check if Councillor Eldris is there, please?
It's indicated for.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Alex. Yeah, for.
For, and Councillor Froggatt, please. Okay, I'll assume she's not there. Just bear with us one moment, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's 39 votes in favour, 5 against and 5 abstentions. The motion is carried.
Thank you very much. We go to item 13 on the agenda, COVID-19 vaccination prioritisation. Moved by Councillor Peatfield, seconded by Councillor Dinser. Councillor Peatfield, would you like to put your motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under CP 53, can I please suggest put forward an amendment to the motion? It's a very slight one. The very last paragraph, where it says Council resolves to write to the Secretary of State. If I could please propose to change the word Secretary of State to JCVI. That stands for Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I see no problem with that, providing nobody else wishes to indicate a problem with it. We carry on, and I've amended
Mr. Mayor, you didn't see my "Can I speak" in the thing. It's Councillor Williams.
I apologise to you, Councillor Williams, and you can speak.
Thank you very much, sir. I just wanted to speak because I understand that changing that does change it, because actually I did write to the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State to request that teachers and school staff be prioritised for the COVID vaccine. So that has already been done. And I totally understand that adding that would change that motion to a different person to write to it, but just to let everybody in the chamber know that that letter has already gone. It went on the 4th of May. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Can I make a comment, Councillor Williams, that obviously, well done for that. Would it be prudent if Councillor Peatfield accepts my comment that perhaps you could send a copy of that letter to the people that Councillor Peatfield just indicated in CP 53? Do you agree, Councillor Peatfield, or would you wish to carry on with your motion?
I would just like to carry on with the motion, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay, so would you like to move your motion, Councillor Peatfield, with your alteration under CP 53?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Only this morning, we learnt that Gavin Williamson's milestone moment, mass testing in schools, has suffered from yet another disastrous government U-turn. Knowing that schools are a huge source of transmission, the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency have sensibly refused to approve the rollout of the mass testing due to huge inaccuracies in results, which would yet again put our teachers and children directly in harm's way. This policy reversal is yet another example of how the government have let down our children by promising the moonshot and delivering a damp squib. It's a familiar theme of this government, ignoring pleas from schools who know their building, their staff, their capacity to cope, and with the ever-changing list of demands on them. Schools have had a huge responsibility thrust upon them to open their doors, to keep educating, whilst expecting to continue to keep children and staff safe from the virus, with no extra financial help. Schools already on their knees financially, starved of funding year on year. In January, school staff were expected to open with a miraculous testing system in place, but with no training, advice, guidance or support, only to be told to close again and get all their learning online in less than 24 hours. Since then, they've been undertaking training, adapting their space once again, and again, now we find it's all for nothing. Our teachers are continually taken for granted. They're severely undervalued, overburdened, underpaid, and on top of all of this, vilified by our government. This motion is simply asking Council to recognise the importance of our school staff, the risks they take every day, not only to their own health, but the health and safety of their own families too. Derby Labour Group acknowledges that there are many front key line workers who should be included in the second phase priority list of vaccinations. We acknowledge that our emergency services and shop workers and more beyond are all equally important, valued and should be protected and prioritised too. However, this motion is focusing on schools, on protecting teachers' health and the well-being and education of our children. Now more than ever, in light of the mass school testing failure, this specific request of prioritising our teachers and school staff keeps us focused on safely seeing our children returning to full-time education and reminds the government not to ignore these invaluable, intrinsic contributors to our society, but to recognise the risk that they take every day and protect them accordingly. I've made this amendment today, and I thank Councillor Williams for sending the letter on the 4th of January to the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State. However, the decision is actually made by an independent expert advisory committee called the JCVI, Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, which is why I've put in the amendment to ask that the letter be addressed to them, the decision makers. They will make that decision on which groups will be prioritised in the second phase of the vaccination rollout by mid-February, we expect. So that gives us ample time to offer our full support to Derby's teaching and school staff by sending this letter and joining the petition for those staff to be in the second phase of the priority vaccination. In doing so, we join 470,000 other people who've signed a government petition online, and we ask that the Derby City Council does the same. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Peatfield. Councillor Dinter, you are seconding this motion. Do you reserve the right to speak now, or do you reserve the right to speak later?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will be seconding this resolution, and I will reserve my right to speak later, prior to the summing up by Councillor Peatfield.
Right. Right, Councillor Williams, I can't let you come back because you're only allowed one.
I haven't spoken on this, Mr. Mayor. You're wrong. I haven't spoken on this. I have not.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I'd advise that Councillor Williams is entitled to speak. She was making a point of clarification in relation to Councillor Peatfield's earlier amendment.
I'll accept that then, because I thought she was speaking on the actual thing. Well, that's fine. Councillor Williams, would you like to speak, please?
Of course, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I would like to say I will be supporting this motion. There have been several instances where I am in absolute disagreement with the way the government have handled this situation, and I have made my opinion very clear to both the Prime Minister and to the Secretary of State on some of these issues. I support our teachers and our teaching staff, our school staff, our nursery staff. They are doing a fantastic job, and the PACE team within the council have been very, very good at supporting all schools, no matter what the governance of the schools. I have said before, and I will say again, if the government, no matter what colour the government, gets things wrong, I am happy to say that they have got things wrong. And on some of these cases, they have got it wrong. Now, in this instance, I do believe that in order to get the economy back up and running, to keep our teachers and our staff at school safe, and to get children back into learning, because it is so evident that they need to have that learning. It is so evident. There are so many reports coming out showing what a really big disaster being outside of school is having on our children. And for that, and for those reasons, I will be supporting this motion. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Skelton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that there are many, in fact, groups, particular work sectors, who have asked for treatment. Their particular situation needs to be given consideration for moving up the priority list. But I think teachers and other school staff, nursery staff, are particularly have a strong case. Obviously, it's quite obvious that in classrooms, face shields, face coverings are not worn by either teachers or pupils, and as the statistics have shown, when the schools went back in September, 2 weeks after that, the case numbers started to quite markedly rise, and people have certainly said that is not a coincidence. So I think for all staff that are in schools, nurseries, etc., do need to be given some priority for being vaccinated, and I think it's quite right that we write to the JCVI so that we ask for some proper professional advice from experts, just to raise this as an issue. And it is so important that children don't miss out anymore on the education that they all rightly deserve. I shall certainly be supporting this, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Carr. Councillor Carr.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I was just unmuting myself. Yeah, I have to say that as originally written, I was somewhat mildly unhappy with this motion, because I don't believe that there's any evidence, and I'm talking about evidence, that the Secretary of State is competent in making these sort of decisions, and therefore that writing to him was a complete waste of time. However, as the JCVI provides independent technical advice and scientific advice, I will now be vote. I was originally going to abstain, but I will now vote for this motion. And thank you, Nadine, for amending it.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Willoughby.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say I wholeheartedly support this motion. Speaking from a personal perspective, as somebody who's been exclusively working from home since the middle of March last year, and sort of trying to be fairly sort of cautious, I'm personally pretty low risk. I think of catching the virus if you took my own behaviour. But in terms of the rest of my family, my wife who works works at a school, and my kids as well who go to school, then I think I've personally got more chance of catching the virus from them, really, as has happened with some colleagues actually of mine. That I was speaking to a colleague the other day, works in a similar position to me, from Rolls-Royce, but he caught it. They had it over Christmas, the COVID bug, because his wife works as a TA in a school, and they caught it. The whole family caught it through her. So I absolutely think that, in my own personal perspective, that teachers should absolutely get the priority because of all the work they do and everything that Councillor Peatfield said. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you, Councillor Willoughby. Councillor Evans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, well, I can't support this motion. Well, for me, there's a couple of things. First of all, we're talking about a vaccine, and the true factual definition of the word, it doesn't include this as a vaccine. It's actually, the definition would be experimental mRNA gene therapy. So I can't advocate the support of that. For me also, I think we need to guard against malfeasance, particularly in public office. We might listen to experts. I mean, 300 years ago, there were experts telling us that the world was flat. And there's plenty of experts globally now that are contradictory to the mainstream media and what's being spoken about through all the particular outlets like the media, Sky and so on. It's like there's no true debate between experts that we're allowed to see and witness. And I find that quite frightening. It was touched on earlier about the testing and how it's not really fit for purpose, the polymer chain reaction test, which gives a massive amount of false positives. It looks like a small amount on the percentage, but it's the percentage of the total number of tests carried out. So it's a huge number, and we're basing everything we do on this data. I'm not trying to say there is not something happening here that's very, very dangerous and not right, but I'm saying we need to proceed with extreme caution. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Evans, you're the last one indicated to me to speak, so I go back now to the seconder of the motion. Councillor Dinser, would you like to make any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I first of all thank Councillor Nadine Peatfield for bringing this motion, and also Councillor Williams for already writing to the Secretary of State and the Prime Minister on this, the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister on this. I really am very proud of the challenge that has been taken up and the frontline work that NHS workers and our care homes workers have been on the front line trying to protect those people who have been affected by coronavirus in the many devastating ways we have been listening and hearing about over the last year. And I think the prioritization of the vulnerable groups and the vaccination, which has been brought in record time to the UK and is being delivered as quickly as possible, is a very positive and good thing. It's right that Councillor Peatfield has highlighted and supported by nearly everybody, by Mr. Councillor Evans's comments at the last, in terms of making sure that we protect our frontline workers and teachers and childcare workers in Derby to do the job we all want them to do in pursuit of getting our schools back open, but in a safe and secure environment. So this motion is welcome, totally supported, and I want to make sure that we get that message to add to, even though the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary are not decision makers, they are influencers. So Councillor Williams' letter is still positive and helpful, but this motion will make sure we communicate our wish to protect our teaching staff and our childcare staff, to make sure that they do the job that we all want, to make sure our children get the best education in the way that is best able to help them to educate and thrive in schools as quickly and as safely as possible. So I would, with pleasure and pride, second this motion and thank everybody who is going to be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Dinser. Councillor Peafield, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I thought that I would just be quite happily sending this to the vote, but it alarms me somewhat that there's some opposition from Councillor Evans. And I just wanted to address it really, because what he was saying sounds dangerously close to being an anti-vaxxer. And as a councillor who has a joint responsibility for public safety, I think that's an extremely dangerous position to take. I think it's a dangerous position to be vocal about, and we have a responsibility to ensure that as many people are vaccinated as possible, to keep our public members safe. So I just wanted to address that. Maybe I've picked up the wrong vibe there, but it seemed quite alarming to me. But I'm happy to move it to the vote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Peafield. In a democratic society, everybody has the right to make any conclusion as they wish, irrespective of whether Councillor Evans is saying this, that and the other. That's all. And now, okay, we'll take it to a vote. So, Alex, will you conduct the vote for me, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If councillors, when I read their name, please could you indicate if you're for or against the motion as it's printed in the agenda, please. Councillor Ashburner, please.
Oh yes, I've been involved in risk analysis for many years and I'm very much in favour of this, so I'm voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Atwell, please.
For, please.
Councillor Barker.
For.
Councillor Bettany.
For.
Councillor Kerr.
For.
Councillor Carr.
Yes, Alex, I vote for. I get my shot tomorrow.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
For.
Councillor Dinser.
For.
Councillor Eldritt.
For.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Froggatt. Councillor Graves Jr., please.
For.
Councillor Graves Senior.
For.
Councillor Hassel.
For.
Councillor Hazelgrave.
For.
Councillor Alison Holmes.
For.
Councillor Matthew Holmes.
Please get your vaccination. For.
Councillor Hudson, please.
For.
Councillor Hussain.
For.
Councillor Ingle.
Most definitely for.
Thank you. Councillor Jangir Khan.
For.
Councillor Shiraz Khan.
For.
Councillor Kuss.
For.
Councillor Lind.
For.
Councillor Marshall.
For.
Councillor McChrystal.
For.
Councillor Nater.
For.
Councillor Nawaz.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
For.
Councillor Peatfield.
For.
Councillor Adrian Pegg.
For.
Councillor Paul Pegg.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Poulter.
For.
Councillor Repton.
For.
Councillor Ralston.
For.
Councillor Russell.
For.
Councillor Sandhu.
For.
Councillor Shanker.
For.
Councillor Skelton.
For.
Councillor Smale. Councillor Smale, please.
Absolutely 100% get your vaccination. I'm voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Stanton, please.
For.
Councillor Testro.
For.
Councillor Webb.
For.
Councillor West.
For.
Councillor Williams.
For, please, Alex.
Councillor Willoughby, please.
Absolutely for, please, Alex.
Councillor Wood.
For.
And finally, the Mayor, Councillor Harwood, please.
For, and I will, Councillor Skelton, be making it public when I have the jab, which is later on this week. Right.
Bear with us one moment, please, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that concludes that. So can we have the final vote, please, Alec?
Mr. Mayor, the motion is carried by 48 votes in favour to 1 against.
Well, that was close, wasn't it? Right, that's ideally the right vote to end this meeting this evening. I thank you all for your participation, particularly those who are watching from home and those watching online. I look forward to seeing you again in a month's time when we do to meet for the annual budget meeting. In the meantime, I can only emphasise what 48 other people have just emphasised. Please take care, continue to follow public health advice, and it's up to you whether you have the vaccine or not, but I certainly am going to. So that concludes the evening, and I'll wait now for Emily, Alex, either of you to tell me the live broadcast.